practice, Darwin conceded, though, that the fossil record was much too spotty to demonstrate those gradual changes, though he was confident that they would eventually turn up. But a century of digging since then has only made their absence more glaring. Paleontologists have devoted whole careers to looking for examples of gradual transitions over time, and a few exceptions have failed. It was Eldridge and Gould's notion to call off the search and accept the evidence of the fossil record on its own terms. Rather than transforming gradually, what we find in the fossil record is in fact everything after its own kind. See, understand this. Darwin always said that if evolution were true, folks, we're going to find it in the fossil record by finding millions and millions of transitional forms, one species evolving into another species. Pigs turning into cows, cats turning into dogs, one species evolving into another species. For example, whales. You know what the evolutionary explanation for a whale is? All evolutionists believe that whales, because they're mammals, air-breathing, that they were cows that walked into the ocean and started evolving flippers. This is the evolutionary explanation for whales. They all believe it. Folks, just think about it for a minute. If a cow walks into the ocean, how long is it going to live? And how long is it going to take it to evolve some flippers for it to swim around before it dies out? What if it back legs, as it's dog paddling around, start evolving into flippers, and then he tries to get out on the ground? He can't walk very well either. Not only do you have to have one, but folks, you got to have both a male and a female at the same time going into the ocean, living long enough to evolve. I mean, you got to start thinking about some of these things. It's very interesting. The Museum of Paleontology here, they do not show a single transitional form of any species. In fact, what we find in the fossil record shows the sudden appearance, fully formed, of all the complex invertebrates, snails, clams, jellyfish, sponges, worms, sea urchins, brachiopods, trilobites, without a trace of ancestors for any of them. Now, if evolution is true, folks, we should be finding all kinds of transitional forms. We have yet to find one. The fossil record also shows the sudden appearance, fully formed, of every major kind of fish, which were supposedly the first vertebrates, without a trace of ancestor for any of them. It's interesting, for example, they have out here in your museum, Royal Tyrrell Museum, big fossil of coelacanth. Coelacanth fish, dated 400 million years old. In fact, the only thing we knew about coelacanth was it died out 400 million years ago, according to the fossil record. Up until a few years ago, in fact, you may have seen the June 1988 issue of National Geographic magazine. June 1988, National Geographic has an article entitled "Coelacanth, the Fish That Time Forgot." I quote, "Frozen in stone, fossil remains of coelacanth fish have been identified in deposits dating back nearly 400 million years. That's the oldest we'd ever found. A fossil, 400 million years old. Some guys are fishing a few years ago off Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, and guess what they caught? They caught a live coelacanth. National Geographic sent down a submersible sub, and guess what? They found several schools of coelacanth fish, supposedly dead 400 million years. Guess what? They compared the live coelacanths to the 400 million year old fossil. Guess what they discovered? It's the same fish. It hadn't changed in 400 million years. Surprise! What is interesting, in fact, is that we have never observed evolution anywhere in the fossil record. There are no missing links, there are no transitional forms. That is why in the universities they're now teaching a new idea called punctuated equilibrium. The idea that since there is no evidence for any gradual transitions or missing links, what Stephen Jay Gould and Eldridge and others are now postulating is that evolution must have occurred by giant leaps and bounds. So punctuated equilibrium is the idea that a lizard laid an egg, and when it hatched, out came a bird fully formed with feathers and wings. If you believe that, folks, I got some great swampland to sell you. And the tragedy is that evolutionists have gone from one absurdity to a greater absurdity. Evolutionists know there are no transitional forms. It's an absolute joke. So you know what they're doing out at your museum here in Drumheller? You go in there, there's big signs you can read. They're doing exactly what the evolutionists in universities are doing. They have now redefined evolution. And you know how they're now defining evolution out there? They're now defining it as natural selection. Natural selection is development within species, change within species. You can cross a Guernsey with a Jersey cow and get a hybrid. You know, every time a baby is born, he's a hybrid of the parents. That's natural selection. Natural selection, folks, is a basic law of science. It's going on all the time. Survival of the fittest, going on all the time. Basic law of science. But natural selection, folks, is not evolution. Evolution is one species evolving into another species. Because there are no transitional forms, we have never observed it in the fossil record or the natural world. They have now redefined evolution to mean natural selection, development within species. Well, folks, that's going on all the time. It's basic genetics. You know, you can cross a collie with a Labrador retriever and get a hybrid. But what is it? It's still a dog. It hasn't changed. You go out there to the museum, you know what they show you? They say natural selection equals evolution. Look at the horse. We got small horses, we got medium horses and big horses. We got Shetland ponies, we got Clydesdales. See the evolution? Folks, they're still horses. You got big horses and small horses. They haven't changed. The tragedy is there's a tremendous new book out by Dr. Philip Johnson, professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley. It came out this summer entitled Darwin on Trial. And this legal scholar, one of the top legal scholars in America at the University of California, Berkeley, looked at Darwinian evolution as a lawyer. And he said if it was brought into a court of law, they'd throw it out for lack of evidence. And he points out in the book that evolutionists have now been reduced to redefining evolution as natural selection, just like they're doing at your museum here, because there is no evidence for evolution. But natural selection, folks, is not evolution. Change is going on all the time within species. You know, they show you out there the peppered moth and the light moth. They say, you see, peppered moths turned into light moths, light moths turned into pepper moths. Therefore, you got evolution. No, that's not evolution. They're still moths. They haven't become anything else. It's basic genetics. It's interesting that Dr. Philip Johnson at Cal Berkeley says the reason why they cling to evolution in spite of the evidence is because they live in fear. Professors at universities live in fear. They live in fear of not being tenured. They live in fear of not getting research grants. They live in fear of not being accepted by the academic community, so they follow the party line in spite of the evidence. People say, well, wait a minute, Carlson, what about all the monkey men? I mean, it's very interesting. You go out here to the Royal Tyrrell Museum, and at the end of the tour, they show you the supposed evolution of the monkey men. And then at the end, they have a picture of Queen Elizabeth of England. They've made a monkey out of the Queen. I thought Fergie had done that. We won't talk about that. It's very interesting when you look at the fossil evidence. What do you find? We could spend a whole night on this. We first had the famous Zinjanthropus man. or Pithecanthropus erectus, let me begin with, found by Dr. Boys down in Indonesia.